I'm Lawrence Lee. I'm 98 years old. If I could start my life over, I would be a much more selfish man. You see, my great-granddaughter came to see me last week. She's working on a school project about life lessons. She asked me, "Papa Lawrence, what's the one thing you wish you'd known?" And the answer just came out of my mouth. It shocked her. It shocked me. I told her I wished I'd been more selfish. I spent nearly a century being the cheerful, reliable rock for everyone. My wife, Linda, our 5 kids, my job, the whole neighborhood. And in doing so, I quietly surrendered my own soul. Let me tell you what happened. It started in the spring of 1973. I was 48. I was a sales manager in Seattle, living in Cedar Grove. Life was a checklist: work, kids' events, church committees, fixing a fence for a neighbor. I was cheerful Lawrence, calm Lawrence, the introvert who made everyone else's comfort his job. My own quiet things, my genealogy research, fishing, they were squeezed into the margins, if they happened at all. I told myself this constant availability was my virtue. But then came a Tuesday that should have been simple. My son, my middle boy, had been begging for a fishing trip, just the 2 of us. I finally promised him. That morning, my boss called. A critical client dinner had come up. He needed me there. I said yes. I didn't even think about it. I hung up and found my boy. I told him we'd go next weekend. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just got this quiet, resigned look on his face, like he'd expected it. That look, it was the first crack. I felt unsettled. I had chosen being reliable over being present, but I buried that feeling. I told myself the dinner was important. That look haunted me, but I didn't change. A month later, Linda tried to reach me. She'd secretly booked a weekend at a little cabin by the water, just the 2 of us. It was a surprise. The day before we were supposed to leave, my bowling league captain called. He was begging me to sub in a championship match. "The team is counting on you, Lawrence." So I went to Linda. I told her we could go the following month. She didn't argue. She just looked at me for a long second. Then she said, "Of course, Lawrence," and turned to go cancel the reservation. She had that same resigned look my son had. I was confused. I told myself I was being a good team player, a dependable friend, but a seed of doubt was planted. That summer, it finally broke through. I was in the basement. I was supposed to be relaxing with my genealogy charts. Really, I was just hiding for 1 hour of silence. The air smelled like old paper and dust. Linda found me. She didn't ask for anything. She just sat down on the old stool beside my desk. We were quiet. Then she looked at my charts, all those names and dates, and then she looked at me. She said, "You know, I sometimes miss the man who wanted things for himself." Her voice was soft. Not the things he thought he should want. The quiet, introverted man who liked puzzles and quiet rivers. Where did he go? She wasn't angry. She was sad. But it was a gentle, profound sadness. For me. Her words just hung there in the dusty air. And in that moment, I saw it. I finally saw it. My calm wasn't peace. It was emotional exhaustion. My cheerfulness was a mask I wore so well, I'd forgotten my own face beneath it. I had been so busy managing the needs of Linda, our 5 children, my team at work, the bowling league, that I had made my own desires invisible. I felt shattered. I had poured myself out for everyone until my own cup was completely empty. I looked at Linda and I saw not my wife, but a witness to my own disappearance. The realization was terrifying, and with it came this wave of grief for what I had lost. I hadn't just lost quiet afternoons fishing, I had lost decades of my own peace. Worse, I saw what I had cost us. I had robbed Linda of the deeper, more authentic connection we could have had. If I'd been a whole person, not just a function, I'd given my family a reliable manager, not always a fully present father or husband. That pattern, it all crystallized for me right there in that basement, in that spring and summer of '73. And the terrible part was, I knew it wouldn't stop there. And the terrible part was, I knew it wouldn't stop there. I was right. That pattern, that automatic yes, it just kept going. I'd have a moment of clarity, a pang of regret, and then the phone would ring or someone would need a ride, and I'd slip right back into being cheerful, reliable Lawrence. The rock. The empty rock. Change didn't happen overnight. I was 48. The habits of a lifetime were deep grooves. But after that talk in the basement, I started to notice things. I'd be driving to yet another church committee meeting I didn't care about, and I'd feel this simmering resentment. Just a low boil. I'd be smiling, nodding, but inside I'd be thinking about a particular bend in the Cedar River where the trout liked to hide, or about a birth record from 1842 I couldn't quite track down. The mask was still on, but it was getting heavier. I began haltingly to say no. The first time nearly choked me. It was old Mr. Henderson from down the street. His gutter was sagging. He saw me pulling in from work and ambled over. "Lawrence," he said, "you're so handy. Think you could take a look Saturday?" And for my whole life, I would have said, "Sure thing, Bill. I'll bring my ladder." But that Saturday, Linda and I had talked about maybe driving out to the lake. No plans, just a maybe. And I wanted that maybe. My heart was pounding. I felt like I was about to commit a crime. I swallowed and said, "I'm sorry, Bill. I can't this Saturday." I didn't give an excuse. I just said I couldn't. He blinked, a little surprised, and said, "Oh, okay then. Another time." And he walked away. The sky didn't fall. The neighborhood didn't collapse. I stood there in my driveway feeling dizzy with the strangeness of it. The next no was harder. It was to my own daughter, Sarah. She was in a pinch. Her babysitter fell through, and she needed someone to watch little Michael for a few hours on a Thursday afternoon. I was retired by then, in my late 60s. My calendar was empty. The old Lawrence would have jumped at the chance, the helpful grandpa. But that Thursday, that was my afternoon. I'd finally, after years of saying someday, carved out Thursday afternoons for my genealogy. I had boxes of letters from my mother's side I hadn't even opened. I looked at Sarah's hopeful face on the phone and I said, "Honey, I'm so sorry. I can't today." There was a long silence. I could hear her disappointment. It felt like a physical pain in my chest. She said, "Oh, okay, Dad. I'll figure something else out." I hung up and I sat at my desk in the basement staring at those unopened boxes. I felt guilty. I felt like a failure. For a solid hour, I couldn't touch the papers. I thought about calling her back, but I didn't. I stayed, and eventually I opened a box. The smell of old paper, of history, filled the air. And for the first time in I don't know how long, I was doing something just because I wanted to. Not because it was useful, not because it helped anyone, just because it fascinated me. It was a long, slow journey, unlearning the belief that my worth was in my utility. Linda saw me struggling. She was patient. Sometimes she'd see me agonizing over a request and she'd just say quietly, "The quiet man likes quiet rivers, Lawrence." It was our code. It meant, remember who you are. But you see, even with the small no's, the big pattern was set. Decades of it. I look back now at 98 and I see the cost in high definition. I see it in the relationship with my middle son, the one I canceled the fishing trip on. He's a good man, a kind man, but we've always been polite. There's a layer of formality there. He never asks me for much. He's always been self-sufficient, and I know that started on that Tuesday in 1973. I taught him not to rely on me for the things that mattered to his heart. I was reliable for the practical things, but not for the precious things. And Linda. Oh, Linda. We've had 72 years of marriage. They are good years. I love her more than anything. But I see now that I gave her a manager, a companion, a calm partner. I wonder what I would have given her if I'd been a whole, passionate, sometimes selfish man. If I'd brought my own curiosities and my own quiet joys to the table instead of just asking her what she needed from me. We could have had deeper conversations. We could have been explorers together of rivers and family histories instead of just co-pilots of a busy household. I gave her stability, but I wonder if I shortchanged her on adventure. That's the real regret. Not the missed fishing trips or the canceled weekends, though those hurt. It's the person I could have been, for myself and for them. The fuller, more authentic version of Lawrence Lee that got buried under a mountain of yes. I was so afraid of being selfish that I made myself empty. And you can't give what you don't have. And you can't give what you don't have. That truth settled into my bones over the years, but it took the hardest moment of my life to really understand it. Linda got sick. Not the kind of sick you bounce back from. It was a slow, quiet fading, and I became her full-time caretaker. Of course I did. That was my role, the reliable one. I managed her medications, her appointments, her meals. I did it all with that same calm cheerfulness. I thought it was my final duty, my ultimate act of love. One afternoon, about a month before she passed, she was having a good day. She was sitting in a chair by the window watching the birds at the feeder in our Cedar Grove yard. I'd just brought her some tea, fussing with the blanket over her knees. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin. She looked at me, really looked at me, and she said, "You've been such a good husband, Lawrence." She meant it, with every ounce of love in her. And those words, they destroyed me. I had to leave the room. I went into the kitchen and I stood at the sink, gripping the counter, and I cried. Silent, heaving sobs that came from a place so deep I didn't know I had it in me. Because in that moment, I saw it all with perfect, terrible clarity. She saw the caretaker, the manager, the reliable rock who was seeing her through to the end, and she was grateful for it. But I realized, with a pain so sharp it took my breath away, that I had given her the same thing on her deathbed that I'd given her all our lives. My function, my utility. Where was me? Where was the man who should have been falling apart with grief? Who should have been clinging to her, saying all the messy, scared, desperate things you say when you're about to lose your whole world? I was still performing, still being good, still managing the crisis. I spent 72 years trying to earn a love that had been freely given to me on our wedding day. I'd been so busy proving I was worthy of her that I'd forgotten to just be with her. And now it was too late. The time for adventures, for quiet rivers, for shared puzzles in the basement was gone. I had waited until there was no time left. I pulled myself together and went back in. I sat beside her. I didn't adjust her blanket. I didn't talk about her medicine. I just held her hand. And I told her something I hadn't said in decades, not in that way. "Linda," I said, my voice rough, "I'm scared." She turned her head on the pillow. She looked surprised, not by the words, but by hearing them from me. "I know," she whispered. "I don't know how to do any of this without you," I said, and it was the truest, most selfish thing I'd ever said to her. It wasn't about comforting her. It was about my own terror. She smiled then, a small, tired smile. "You'll figure it out. The quiet man will find his river." But I hadn't. That was the tragedy. I've spent so long ignoring that man that I didn't know how to find him anymore, and she knew it. That's what her sadness in the basement had been about all those years ago. She wasn't just missing who I was, she was worried about who I'd be when she was gone. An empty vessel. She died on a Tuesday morning, peacefully, and when she was gone, the silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was accusing. Every room echoed with all the things I hadn't said, all the ways I hadn't been fully there. I had 5 children, 11 grandchildren, a whole community. They checked on me, they called, but I was profoundly, utterly alone. Because the person I had built my life around was gone, and I had neglected to build a life inside myself. That was the bottom. That was the cost, tallied up and presented in the quiet of an empty house. I had given everything away and was left with nothing to sustain me. No passionate hobby I'd nurtured, no deep sense of self, just a list of roles I no longer had to play. The cheerfulness was gone. The calm was just numbness. The rock had crumbled into dust. I sat in my chair for weeks, just sat. And I thought about that fishing trip, that missed weekend, that basement conversation. I saw the chain so clearly, link by link. Each yes to someone else was a no to myself, and each no to myself made me a little less present for them. It was a slow theft, and I was both the robber and the victim. It's a terrible thing to realize you've been the architect of your own emptiness. But you see, that's also where it starts to change. When you hit the bottom, there's nothing left to do but look up, or in my case, look inward. For the first time, with no one left to manage, I had to ask myself the only question that mattered. What do you want, Lawrence? What do you want, Lawrence? It took me a long time to answer that. Years, really. I started small. I asked one of my grandsons to take me fishing, not because he needed it, but because I did. We sat by the river, not talking much, and it was okay. I dug back into my genealogy, not as an escape, but as a pursuit. I found a connection to a ship's carpenter from Norway that thrilled me in a quiet, personal way. I even joined a seniors bowling league, but this time I only went when I felt like it. I said no to games when I wanted a quiet evening. It felt strange, but with each small choice I felt a little more solid. A little less like a ghost in my own life. Here's what I learned, sitting here at 98. You cannot pour from an empty cup. It's not a clever saying, it's a physical law. I spent decades thinking my self-sacrifice was love. It wasn't. It was a slow suicide of the spirit. Being a little selfish, protecting your time, honoring your own quiet joys isn't cruel. It's the necessary fuel. It's what lets you be truly present for others without that simmering resentment. My calm wasn't strength, it was depletion. My cheerfulness was a performance that left me hollow. I thought I was building a legacy of reliability. I was building a prison of my own making. I was wrong about what my family needed from me. They didn't need a manager. They didn't need a rock. They needed a person. A whole, complex, sometimes tired, sometimes passionate person. By making myself into a function, I robbed them of that. I robbed Linda of a true partner. I robbed my children of a father who could model what it meant to have a self. I taught them, by my example, that their own needs were secondary. What a terrible lesson. So here is my direct advice to you. It's simple, but it's not easy. Look at your calendar. Right now, in your mind, is there anything on it that is just for you? Not for your role as parent, spouse, employee, or friend. Something that feeds only your own quiet curiosity or peace? If there isn't, put it there. 1 hour, one afternoon, and defend that time like you'd defend your child. Say no to something good, a committee, a favor, even a family request, to say yes to that one essential thing. Your fishing trip, your genealogy, your walk in the woods, your silent cup of coffee on the porch. That is not a luxury. It is the core. It is the foundation of everything else you will give to the world. If you are the reliable one, the cheerful rock, I am speaking directly to you. Your worth is not in your utility. Your love is not measured in tasks completed. You are allowed to want things for yourself. You are allowed to be quiet, to be introverted, to protect your energy. In fact, you must. Because the person they will miss when you're gone is not the list of things you did. It's the you that you were when you did them. Were you there? Or were you just a friendly ghost going through the motions? I have regret. Of course I do. I regret the decades I lost, the deeper connection Linda and I could have shared. But I am not without hope. For you. It took me 50 years to see the pattern. You might see it tomorrow. You have time. Maybe not to change everything, but to change something. To carve out one piece of your life and claim it back. My great-granddaughter who asked me the question, I told her all of this. And I watch her now. She's 16, and she already guards her time to draw, which is her quiet joy, with a fierceness I never had. That gives me more peace than any committee meeting ever did. This place, this channel, is full of stories like mine. People who've lived a long time and learned things the hard way. If what I've said has struck a chord with you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe and turn on those notifications. There are more voices here, more wisdom gathered from a lifetime of mistakes, and it might just save you some of your own. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me, what's the one quiet thing you've been putting off? The river you haven't fished, the puzzle you haven't solved, the book you haven't written. Or maybe, who is the person you need to stop performing for and just be with? If this story of an old man and his empty cup meant something, hit that like button. It lets me know this wasn't just spoken into the void. And share it. Share it with the cheerful, reliable person in your life who you suspect might be running on empty. They might need to hear it most. Maybe you have a story of your own, a lesson learned too late, or just in time. There's a form in the description where you can tell the folks here about it. Your story could be the one that helps someone else see clearly. And if you want to explore this idea more of how to build a life that doesn't leave you hollow, I'd recommend a book that helped me put words to my feelings later in life. It's called The Gift of Years by Joan Chittister. It's not about being old, it's about being whole at any age. There's a link for it below. Don't wait. Don't be like me, realizing at 98 that you were the most important person you ever neglected. Start today. Be selfish enough to protect the person you are, so you can be generous enough to give the world who you were meant to be. That's my advice. That's my regret. I hope you use one to avoid the other.